Hello, I am Liz Powell. I'm the founder and head of G2G Consulting, which stands for Government to Growth, Government Affairs lobbying firm in Washington, D.C. I'm also the founder of Women's Health Advocates and several other women's health initiatives over the years. And my role today is really to kick things off. So this is the first, I would say, in our series of online events where we want to connect with the community on women's health, educate on women's health gaps and opportunities, and advance policy, funding, other initiatives that will advance women's health overall. So today we're talking about women's health research, why we need it now more than ever. We've got an esteemed panel of experts and we've got our Pittsburgh leadership team guiding us through today's call. So, first off, just a little bit about Women's Health Advocates. We are an organization that is focused solely on lobbying. We're the only entity that is solely focused on lobbying. We are starting at the federal level in Washington, D.C., but in time we are spreading down to the state level and then up on the global level. So, at all levels, we want to be effective and impactful. We are in all 50 states. We had our first Women's Health Day. It was actually the first ever Women's Health Capitol Hill Day, where it's the holistic women's health definition that was addressed. We had a great congressional briefing, followed by meetings with members of Congress and their staff, and then closed out with the reception. We had 8 different members of Congress engage, participate, speak throughout the day with us. And it really felt like we made a difference. We heard repeatedly from the members how important it was to have advocates come to Washington to come talk to members of Congress about how policies and their decisions are impacting us and women's health broadly. Also, that definition of women's health that impacts the health of women solely, disproportionately, and or differently over the lifespan head to toe is a really valuable definition we need to keep saying over and over again because we found a lot of members of Congress really responded to that. And for a long time, it's been quite a niche definition. And so we wanted to be clear that it's that broad definition. So at Women's Health Advocates, that's what we're working to do, to educate, to advocate on that broad definition, on ways to advance policies and funding levels to make a difference. So we are active, as I said, in all 50 states, and we've got some cities getting really, really active, and Pittsburgh is one of them. So I'm thrilled to be teaming up with Shruti and Maura, who are co-leaders of our Pittsburgh chapter of Women's Health Advocates. And today, Shruti is going to lead us through today's online event. So with that, I'd love to pass it to the amazing, very organized, very inspiring Shruti Valjee.
Thank you, Liz. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining today. For those I haven't met, I am originally from Pittsburgh, and I actually recently moved back after spending a decade outside of DC to be closer to family. Much to the dismay of my Giants fan husband, I love Pittsburgh. It's a city known for its grit, innovation, and resilience. It's also home to Magee-Women's Research Institute. I actually didn't know this, but until 1992, there wasn't even a research institute solely focused on women's health and reproductive biology. And today, Magee is the largest one in the country, advancing care from tiny genes to entire populations. So it only felt right to spotlight some of the amazing work being done by people in Pittsburgh and open it up to all of you. We know this is a really busy time of year, but women's health research can't wait, and it's deeply personal. I am on my own journey right now to grow my family, and I know so many women who are navigating changes with their own bodies, hormones, and health, all while balancing careers and caregiving and everything else that life throws our way. And I can't help but imagine how much easier that would be, how much easier those experiences would be if we had more research, more answers, and more support. And that's what today is all about, learning from the experts, sharing your own thoughts and questions, and just getting together, banding together for real change, because it really does affect all of us. With that, I would love to introduce Maura Rosenfeld, my co-lead for the Pittsburgh chapter of Women's Health, Chief Business Officer of DermaBio and a true thriver. She's here to share her lived experience and how research has shaped her. Maura, take it away.
Thank you, Shruti. Thank you very much. As Shruti mentioned, I'm here. I also came back to Pittsburgh after more decades away than she was. And there's a reason they call this place the City of Steel, because that's what we're made of here. And last April, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. I don't have dense breast. I didn't have any known biomarkers of risk, no family history, but it still happened. I got that call. It was picked up in a routine mammogram, and I got the call that I have breast cancer. Now, I'm going to say something that people who haven't had cancer often look at me with skepticism, but I was lucky. Why was I lucky? First of all, it was discovered early. It hadn't spread through my body. I had a triple positive tumor. For those of you who aren't familiar, that means there are estrogen and progesterone receptors as well as the Herceptin hormone. That means there are targeted treatments available, which is not available for the opposite case of triple positive. And women who have that go through very, very, very aggressive regimens of chemo treatment that are very difficult. I also have health insurance. I also was treated by the other great healthcare center here in Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh is a great place for medical care. I got amazing care at Allegheny Health Network from the doctors, the nurses, the PAs, the office administrations, the technicians. Everyone treated me, not only were they knowledgeable, but with kindness, and made what could be a very scary experience, made me feel calm and protected. I also had great support from my family. I also had the opportunity, which I'm still doing, to participate in an oncology exercise program, which actually lessened the side effects and also got me into better shape now than I was when I started. All of this is what makes me lucky. And all of that, most of it, as many things as you notice with the targeted treatment, were the result of research that's happened until today in the space of breast cancer. But I know enough. I work, as Shruti mentioned, I work in healthcare innovation. I know how hard it is to get anything, to get any data, to get what's needed, and how much it costs for that to happen, for any improvements to happen, for any innovation to advance things. So many patients have to be subjected to participate in clinical research, aside from the basic research that's happening in laboratories, to really take it out into the field and make it available to the women who need it for their treatment. This takes so much money and so much time. Government funding can move the needle in a way that no amount of equity funding can. And what still needs to be done? There's so much just in breast cancer. We know that there is a law passed to notify women of dense breasts that they have this condition, but we still haven't made the insurance companies cover the extra screening needed. That's one of the topics that we're working on and that you can send a letter about. There's so much more in other things. How about getting more treatments that are more specific? And I tell you, again, I was lucky. I got through it pretty well. But having all those chemicals in your body is no picnic at all. And even the biological treatments that are perhaps more gentle than the chemotherapy can give you a bad reaction as well. There's still so much more that needs to be done to make the treatments more precise, more targeted, to have less side effects. I also had reached menopause. Women are often thrown into menopause in a very early age because of these treatments. I talked to someone the other day who had had that situation happen to her. There's still so much work to be done, and that's just breast cancer. The screening needs to be available to everybody. And there's so many other diseases that affect women in a different way than men or with more prevalence. For example, our company works on autoimmune diseases. Women suffer from these at a much greater rate than men, and in a different way because of the difference in our hormones. Cardiology, there's so much that still needs to be done, and so many patients out there with stories that are even so much harder than mine. But I'm only one voice today, but together, and one voice can easily get lost in the wilderness. But if we put all of our voices together, we really can make a difference. And there's no one here who first of all, isn't alive because of a mother, that doesn't have a woman to them that's important in their life. So all of us who are here, what I'm asking you to do to help us do this, reach out to your friends, to your family, your coworkers. This is not politics. This is nonpartisan. This is just to advance women's health. That's what we're asking you to join in. And I hope that you're seeing a real person here who's been through it. And again, I have great appreciation for all that preceded me and allowing this to happen. But there's still so much more work to be done. And I hope you will all join in with us to do this. Whether you're in Pittsburgh or somewhere else, we need your voice. Please, please join us. Thank you. And now I'm going to call on the formidable Dr. Jocelyn Fitzgerald, who not only is an amazing physician clinician in urogynecology, she's also an outspoken spokeswoman for reimbursement for women's issues. Over to you, Jocelyn.
Hello, everyone. Hi, I'm Jocelyn Fitzgerald. I am a a urogynecologist and reconstructive pelvic surgeon at Magee-Women's Hospital and faculty at the Magee-Women's Research Institute. I'm very excited to be here today to talk to you all about this issue. And I specifically have a lot of interest. You can see from my hat back here that says reimburse gynecologic surgery equally. A lot of people don't realize how the infrastructure that's been set in place has really handicapped and handcuffed women's health from the growth that it's trying to achieve, that it should have based on its demand, and how the clinical work that we do, particularly inside of OBGYN, to be clear, OBGYN is not all of women's health, but the reimbursement issues lead to a decrease in the research funding that we're able to provide. So I think Madeline's advancing the slides. Perfect. So just to give you like a little bit of background, this is a very quick and dirty version of this. A lot of people don't realize that particularly around gynecologic surgery, which includes, I'm a prolapse and incontinence surgeon, but also fibroids, endometriosis, GYN surgical care for cancers. All of this has been deeply devalued since the early 1990s. There are policies put in place by the Centers for Medicaid and Medicare Services and the American Medical Association that came out of the Social Security Act when Medicaid and Medicare were sort of really established, that made GYN surgical services less sustainable and less profitable for hospitals. I can go into more details on another day if you want to hear more, but basically, as a result of those policies, the reimbursement ceiling for women's health services has really been capped. And it has led to a lot of services we provide, like endometriosis, like fibroids, to be forced for patients to pay them out of pocket, as surgeons are no longer able to provide those services in an insurance-based model in many hospitals across the country. We also know from the research I've done and many others that equal surgeries between men and women, like comparable things, particularly around urology and gynecology, they reimburse up to 150% more if it is a male procedure. So the male surgeries and male research is financially more advantageous for healthcare institutions. And as a result, this economic environment really disincentivizes the training and retention of gynecologic surgeons. By the way, this happens on the OB side as well, but particularly in gynecology, it leads to a higher rate of surgical complications when surgeons are done by GYNs with lesser training, poor patient outcomes, and as a result, decreased advancing in research and clinical expertise because we have such an enormous clinical volume, we're unable to make as much revenue as other surgical services in the hospital. So we can't protect our time for research, nor do we have as big of a war chest for when we're in a situation like all of science is currently, where there is just cutting funding right and left. We don't have the same reserves as other types of doctors do. Next slide. I kind of alluded to this, so I won't spend a lot of time, but the budget neutrality clause that's part of the Social Security Act in the early 90s is really what fixed physician reimbursement into place. The entire pool of medical reimbursement is fixed in a finite pool. And at the beginning of all this in the early 90s, obstetrics and gynecology services were largely devalued. The standard for which all gynecologic surgery, no matter how advanced, is compared to is a D&C, which isn't to say D&C isn't a complex procedure, but it's one of the more straightforward and short things that we do, doesn't have high complexity relative to like a cancer surgery. And so that has really dragged the reimbursement down. And in order to raise the reimbursement in gynecologic surgery, we have to take that funding, or those RVUs, which is this unit of measure we use to compare payment in all surgical specialties, we have to decrease it from another specialty. So as you can imagine, things like orthopedics, urology, they're not super happy to donate some of their quote value to obstetrics and gynecology to make it more profitable. So we've really been set up to fail from the beginning. Next slide. This is my recent paper that came out this year. These are some of my brilliant collaborators also here as authors, where we re-evaluated 100 procedures that are female specific compared to their male equivalents, found that on average, this is conservative, favoring male patients by 25 to 30%, but when it comes to urinary tract procedures, it is 150%. Even though the RVUs have increased slightly over time, this gender-based reimbursement gap persists and has actually gotten bigger. Next slide. And so as you can see, like in terms of providing care, we are being disinvested and disincentivized to provide our care to our patients. So gynecologic surgeons get less operating time, less equipment, and less staff in favor of more profitable specialties. Next slide. And what we're doing through women's health advocates and all of the kind of work we're doing with this group here is we're really trying to get to the root cause of this. And as this relates to research, I really just want to reiterate one more time that in an environment like we're in right now, where the entire budget for all of medicine and all of science is being cut by the NIH, the reserves that OBGYN departments have relative to their profitability are much smaller. So we aren't able to protect our researchers that are already doing research because we simply just don't have the cash base. So these are some legislative fixes. I won't go through all of them, but we are working really hard from multiple angles, multiple legislative experts to push back against these payment recommendations from the AMA. We're really trying to address these inequities on sex-specific procedural codes, and to sort of modify the outdated cap via Congress. We're involving members of Congress quite a bit, and to ensure that that payment reimbursement is equitable. So please stay tuned, and if you're able to help us out in any way, we'd be happy to have you. I think it's the last slide, but we'll skip to the next. Perfect. I'm gonna introduce my very good friend and colleague, Dr. Mary Ackenbaum, who I'll let her introduce herself, but she's going to talk. She's a women's health researcher and a urogynecologist, and is going to talk about some of the gaps in women's health specifically.
Thanks, Dr. Fitzgerald. I appreciate you very much. Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Ackenbaum, Mary Ackenbaum. I'm a urogynecologic surgeon scientist and really excited to be here with all of you today to talk a bit more about gaps and advancements in women's health research. Next slide, please. So women's health has been historically characterized by these significant gaps that exist and have negatively impacted care and outcomes for women. And largely, this has been contributed to by, or has a heavy element of a factor that's been contributing to it, has been that women's health research has just not been prioritized. This slide here is essentially a timeline of the gains or the wins that we have achieved, but you can see notably, these were just a few decades ago. So 1990 is when the NIH first established an Office of Research on Women's Health. And then in 1993, that was when the NIH Revitalization Act came forward. And this pushed the NIH to create guidelines that would require the inclusion of women and minoritized persons from racially and ethnically minoritized groups to be included in clinical trials. 1994 is when we were first seeing the US FDA creating an Office of Women's Health. And then notably in 2016, this is less than a decade ago, the NIH introduced this rule of sex as a biologic factor or variable, meaning that researchers who were putting in proposals to attain grant funding had to basically justify and note why and how they are studying sex and how there may be sex-specific differences and the different conditions that they're looking at. So despite these efforts, and these efforts that have come quite late, we're seeing significant gaps still. And these women's health issues persist. And so this really does just underscore the major need that we have to invest more in women's health research. Next slide. So Alzheimer's disease is it's a very tough, challenging condition. You can see with this slide, it sort of summarizes lots of different factoids about it. I bring it up because it's an area of interest of mine, and notably, it really does affect women more. So you can see in the yellow sort of buckets here, 1 in 3 seniors dies with Alzheimer's disease, and notably, the lifetime risk for those with Alzheimer's or to get Alzheimer's at age 45 is 1 in 5 for women, so 20%. Next slide. And thinking more about women as it relates to Alzheimer's disease, it's very prevalent. So more than 11 million women are either living with Alzheimer's themselves or caring for somebody who has it. 2/3 of all Americans who have Alzheimer's disease are women, right? And then thinking about women even further, women in their 60s are more than twice as likely to develop Alzheimer's disease over the rest of their lives as they are to develop breast cancer. So highly relevant, highly prevalent, and very much is affecting women in some way, shape, or form. Next slide. So my area of research is in perioperative neurocognitive disorders. So this is sort of what we would call a related dementia. And it's really focused on any sort of cognitive decline, change in the way that somebody is thinking, able to take care of themselves, able to make plans after surgery. And this pictorial here just shows you that there's lots of different factors that are related to this, how the brain is working, the structure of the brain, what's going on with blood vessels in the body, inflammation that may be chronically present from another condition or from the surgery itself, as well as anesthesia, and then the way that one's body is working, the physiology too. All of these factors contribute, and of course there's more. Next slide. Now, I'm sure many of you are thinking, wow, she's a urogynecologic surgeon. Why is she studying cognitive impairment after surgery? And I promise you, I will make that connect and make sure it's known why it's so important that we study it. But as a urogynecologic surgeon, my job is to take care of people with pelvic floor issues. And pelvic floor disorders are conditions that are characterized by either weakening or damage to muscles, ligaments, and connective tissues that support the pelvic organs. And when that damage happens, it can lead to conditions like pelvic organ prolapse. You can see that on the left there, where the pelvic organs are starting to herniate down and outside of the pelvis. Urinary incontinence, fecal incontinence, bladder and bowel problems, as you see there. I take care of all of these things. And factors related to the development of these things are numerous, including childbirth, aging, surgery, and other injuries to the pelvic region. Next slide. So why are these relevant? And you've heard me say this already, right? It's relevant because it's prevalent. It's the theme here. Pelvic floor disorders are super common. About 1/4 of all women in the US have them. And then when we start to age, we're seeing more of them. So those aged 60 to 79 years old, we're seeing more than 40%. And then once you hit 80, it's half. Half of all women are experiencing and managing through life with at least one pelvic floor disorder. Notably, 1 in 5 women are undergoing surgery for a pelvic floor disorder at some point in their life. Next slide. And so this is where the intersection comes in, right? So I take care of women who have pelvic floor issues. These can greatly burden one's lives, and it can absolutely lead to decreased quality of life. So cognitive decline after surgery can too. And I wanted to see what the intersect of this was. So we did a study on cognitive impairment after prolapse surgery. I do not want you to be scared or alarmed by these numbers here. The take-home points are in the boxes and the arrows that you can see. So we followed women over time. We were able to enroll 81 women where we follow and continue to follow them prospectively. And we found that at 2 weeks after surgery, 40% of them were having significant cognitive decline on their brain games or cognitive testing. Notably, 3 months after surgery, so women are managing their own medications, taking care of themselves, driving, right? They are independent, community dwelling, maybe back to work, they're living their lives, and we're still seeing over 1/3 of women having significant cognitive decline after surgery. This is striking, and it's really important as a surgeon who does quality of life-based surgery. Next slide. So why should we be considering these disorders or these conditions in urogynecologic patients? Because the intersect of pelvic floor disorders and this cognitive impairment after surgery overlaps. So with both, it often happens in older patients and women who are frail. Notably for pelvic floor disorders, the surgeries that I do are elective, but not only elective, they're also potentially deferrable, right? There's other options that I may be able to counsel my patients on, all with the goal of improving quality of life, but I don't want to exchange one quality of life issue for another. These hospitalizations are short now, right? People are coming in and having major surgeries we did years ago where they would stay a week, and now they're going home due to advancements in the surgeries that we can do and our approaches. But that also means that healthcare providers are not able to see the patients in these settings anymore. So we don't know if something's happening. And so all of this contributes to why people should be thinking about perioperative neurocognitive disorders or cognitive decline after surgery more, because it truly can't influence how patients are counseled, the decision-making process that happens and is shared between a person and their surgeon, and then plans for surgery in general. Next slide. So I wanted to highlight some of those important research advances that have been made, right? I'm talking about where my work is going and how I'm trying to move the needle with that. But you can see here, there's 3 great examples of what women's health research advances have done to improve outcomes. So the HPV vaccine has been huge in that it provides protection against high-risk strains of this virus that cause cervical cancer. And we know that cervical cancer rates have gone down significantly. Non-invasive prenatal testing and genetic screening. With these new tests, we've been able to gain a much better insight of different genetic conditions that can affect our offspring, and that impacts how patients are counseled and cared for. And then further, breast imaging has been huge. The imaging has truly advanced in a way that we're able to detect earlier when breast cancer is happening, and that in itself improves outcomes for women with breast cancer. So, significant and relevant research, when we do this and we support this, it narrows the knowledge gaps that exist. And by narrowing those knowledge gaps, we are being innovative, and then we're improving outcomes for women. Next slide. And with that, I would love to introduce Liz Powell. Thank you. Be amazing.
Thank you. Amazing, amazing speakers. Really appreciate it. I think you can go to the next slide. I just wanted to make sure we talked about advocacy and what is happening in this space to advance women's health. So first off, we are women's health advocates leading federal education and policy change. We talked about that first ever Women's Health Capitol Hill Day that addressed the holistic women's health. Many other women's health advocates are out there doing amazing jobs focused on specific health issues. This was the first to cover all of the women's health issues across the lifespan, head to toe. And we had a great response. Lots of members of Congress, bipartisan. And since then, we've actually done lots of follow-up calls to plan out amendments and different legislative strategies. So thank you all who came that day and all who supported us by posting on social media, by writing letters to your members of Congress. Within 1 month, we had 1,000 letters go in asking members of Congress to come or to send their staff to our special Hill Day. So that worked fantastically. So we're doing the same thing for our next Capitol Hill Day, which is the Breast Cancer Early Detection Coalition Capitol Hill Day on July 16th. We've got advocates ready to go, planning to come to DC. We're going to do a luncheon and an advocacy training, several Hill meetings, and then close out with the annual softball game where the women members of Congress play women in the media. And they raise money for breast cancer, especially young breast cancer survivors. So it'll be a great day, and all these things are happening in an effort to educate and advocate. And we've just got an ongoing lobbying effort where I go to a lot of events and fundraisers, which because we're a 100% lobbying organization, we're not nonprofit, we can be actively engaged in those events. And so I go and talk with members as much as I can to educate. I'm finding whether Democrat, Republican, as I start to share some basic facts, some of the facts you heard today, I get a very interested response. So I think a lot of our work is education. And with that education, we will be able to shift policy time. So keep the faith on that. We have been working on these appropriation bills. There was a bit of a pause with the budget process, but now that'll be up again and active again. And so we are working to shape that and just remaining constantly present with the different members of Congress. So the other thing we're working on is targeted letter writing. So I mentioned the 1,000 letters within 1 month to attend our May 21st event. We also are doing other letters targeted on specific topics. And so if you go to womenshealthadvocates.org, right there at the top, you can click the button to write a letter to your member. We've got a bunch of draft letters for you on a range of issues, and you can pick the one that resonates for you. You just put in your address. It'll tell you who your members of Congress are. The letter is ready for you to send. All you need to do is add in a sentence or two, how much you would like to personalize, to explain why breast cancer is important to you, for example, or why more research funding is important to you, or whatever resonates for you. So please send those letters. They do make a difference. As a former Capitol Hill staffer, I can say that we do analyze those letters coming in. And if we see a lot of them on a specific topic, then we know to tell the boss we need to be doing something, whether it's co-sponsoring a bill, floor amendment, that type of activity. So it really does make a difference. Right now, we've got a letter writing campaign that we are doing in conjunction with Society for Women's Health Research. They really took the lead on it in drafting the letter, but we are trying to team up and get as many organizations and companies to co-sign this letter asking for NIH research funding, highlighting the SWAN study, which is focused on women, to continue that funding because it makes a huge difference for all of us. So please sign on to the letter. You can see the link there. I'll post it in a second in the chat box. But please get as many folks as possible to sign on. The deadline is tomorrow, so we need to move quickly. Finally, we've got a ton going on with our executive leadership and these regional leaders. So we, as I said, we're in all 50 states. We've got cities popping up with great leaders. So you saw the Pittsburgh leadership. We've got the same, everything spanning from Boston to San Francisco, Tulsa in between, like every single part of this country is getting active. So we're super excited to see all these chapters grow. And we are starting to plan events in each of these regions. So get involved on your local level. You can do so very easily. Just email us at info@womenshealthadvocates.org. And then we also, if you're on our mailing list, you'll be getting our updates of when we're having these planning calls and when we're having these events. So that's probably the easiest way to engage. And then just this grassroots movement overall is definitely going to be key to making a difference. So we can increase those research dollars through all of us getting active in our communities as well as at the national level, and talking to our members of Congress. There'll be town halls happening in August as the members go home. There'll be chances to interact with them and just ask that simple question of, what are you doing to address women's health research gaps? It's a friendly, it doesn't have to be confrontational, but just asking the question starts to get members of Congress to think about it themselves. So that is my slide, and I'm passing it on to the wonderful Melinda Calesi, who is a dynamo who took her amazing experience, passion, brilliance from Los Angeles to Pittsburgh to launch the most unique, amazing organization I've ever seen. Got to be in the actual location where all the walls have imprints about these inequities in women's health and how she's working to close those gaps. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it to you, Melinda, to do your own intro, but the amazing Melinda Calesi.
Thank you so much for that nice intro, Liz. And I'm so happy to be here today. My name's Melinda Calesi. I'm the founder of Women Who Rock and also a professor of music business here in Pittsburgh at Point Park University. And I really wanted to share with everybody the why behind my story, why I founded Women Who Rock, and how music has really become this amazing force for change in women's health. Like so many of you have shared today, this mission is deeply personal. A few years ago, my mom was diagnosed with a cancer that had a 5% survival rate. And as you can imagine, those odds were devastating, but it was cutting edge research in a clinical trial that saved her life right here in Pittsburgh. And I watched firsthand how research can make the difference. I also spent my career as a musician and an executive in Los Angeles in the music industry, and also experienced firsthand the gender gaps that women in music continue to face. So that experience, along with my lifelong passion for music, it lit a fire in me. I founded Women Who Rock to fuse the power of music with the urgency to spread awareness about the state and the importance of women's health research. That research, it shouldn't be a privilege, it should be a promise for every woman. So through Women Who Rock, we have been lucky enough to unite major artists like Melissa Etheridge, Jordan Sparks, Lainey Wilson, and so many more. They've all used their voices and platforms to amplify the critical need for investment in women's health. And these artists don't just perform in our events, although it's always amazing to see their talents on stage. But what really is happening is they are helping to spark conversations and drive support for groundbreaking research, both nationally and globally. One of the most impactful partnerships that we've built is with Magee-Women's Research Institute, the largest research institute in the US dedicated exclusively to women's health. Through these partnerships, Women Who Rock has opened doors, conversations for Magee on a global scale, bringing their research to new audiences and elevating the urgency of funding for women's health. A lot of people ask me why music, and it really is simple. Music connects us. It's a universal language, and it brings people together in a way that nothing else can. Yet, just like women's health, women in music are also underrepresented. Only 21% of artists on the Billboard Hot 100 last year were women. So we're also working to change that by shining a light on these disparities through our concerts, campaigns, partnerships. Women Who Rock has really become the movement for change. Our movement continues this September 5th. We host a flagship Women Who Rock benefit concert benefiting Magee-Women's Research Institute. This year, global superstar Jessica Simpson is joining the movement and performing live that night at Stage A in Pittsburgh, along with a whole lineup of music, purpose. We have a silent auction, calls to action for change. This is a night where women's health really takes center stage. We're almost sold out of tickets. Every ticket supports the critical research to improve health outcomes for women everywhere. And just to end, Women Who Rock right now, and it has been since we started this about 8 years ago, it is the hope that our daughters will live in a world where women's health is prioritized, hope that music will connect and continue to be a rallying cry for equity, hope that stories like my mom's become the rule and not just the rare miracle. So I'd like to invite all of you to be part of this hope right now. Use your platform, follow us at Women Who Rock. No platform, big or small, it all makes a difference. And we really, especially right now, need to unite to advocate together. So I hope I get a chance to meet a lot of you in Pittsburgh. And thank you again for having me today.
I don't know about any of you on this call, but after I spend more than 60 seconds with any of these women, I feel fired up. And I'm just reading through the chat. Lynn, you mentioned, tell us how we can support you. Well, here are a few different ways. I know that we've been posting in the chat box some links, but I know since most of you are probably on your phones right now or on your desktops, if you just scan any of these QR codes, the first one will take you to our Women's Health Advocates page. That is not exclusive to Pittsburgh. That is, but wherever you are, you can sign up and you can get information on any of the events that we're having, any initiatives, much like Liz kind of talked through some of the work that they're doing and letters. All that good stuff is in the regular updates from the Women's Health Advocates page. So definitely sign up for that. And if you're interested in getting more involved in your local chapter or starting your own local chapter, then that is also the same place you can go. If you're interested in attending the Women Who Rock benefit concert in Pittsburgh on September 5th, that is the next code that you can scan. Like Melinda said, tickets are limited. I got mine. I snagged it early. And I'm really excited it'll be my first time actually being able to attend the concert in person. And I'm really excited to just see everything. I think Melinda said there's like a pink carpet, in lieu of a red carpet. And so I think that's really cute. I'm excited for that. If you are not able to come to Pittsburgh in September, but you are still interested in kind of keeping tabs on what Women Who Rock does, then definitely check out the very last link on the far right. There's lots of other ways to support that organization along with Magee Research Institute. Melinda also has a very cool pop-up shop store in Pittsburgh that has just the same one that Liz was kind of mentioning. It just has a bunch of merch that is empowering and really cute. And from here, we'd also we've all done the talking now. We'd love to open the floor to all of you and kind of talk through some questions that you have. I've already started to kind of keep tabs on some of them. So I am just going to start from the very top. Mary and Jocelyn, some of these first ones might be for you. So is it only after pelvic floor surgeries, or are there cognitive declines after any surgery?
Hi. No, it can be any surgery. But the reason that I choose to focus on urogynecologic patients is twofold. One, some of the studies that have been done years ago, so let's go back to the 90s. The thought was that cognitive decline after surgery was related to anesthesia. But really, there's multiple factors, as I mentioned. And so there was a really interesting study that was done a few years ago where they had healthy older adults undergo general anesthesia only, no surgery. And they did cognitive testing before and after the surgery and found that there was no change. And it really speaks to the fact that the surgery itself elicits an inflammatory response, and that amount of inflammation can affect the brain. So, as you can imagine, somebody who's having their colon removed because they have inflammatory bowel disease, they may have a lot more inflammation than somebody who goes and has surgery for a knee replacement, right? So same sort of concept as to why I want to narrow and focus in on urogyn surgeries, because it narrows the heterogeneity. I can control the results a little bit more. The other piece is too, thinking about women, women's brains are rich in estrogen receptors. We do not understand this. And a lot of the research that's been done on cognitive decline after surgery is just pulling men and women together. It really has to be teased apart. Estrogen is likely a very important variable. And so this is at least helping us get in that direction and figuring out what the role of estrogen is and thinking more about sex-specific differences as it relates to cognitive decline after surgery.
Jocelyn, anything you wanted to add to that?
Dr. Ackenbaum is really the expert in that subject, but no, I like really use her research every day when I'm making decisions with my patients about what surgery we're going to choose. And my goal for them is to have like the least inflammatory invasive surgery possible, and like really using precision medicine to get them off the OR table and back to their life as quickly as possible, keeping in mind absolutely their age and their risk factors so they can not, as she said earlier, come out of surgery with a new quality of life issue. Also, are we all just coming on to the screen when we're doing questions, or I wasn't sure if we were staying on a panel?
We can all do that. Yeah. The next question was, were patients struggling with cognitive decline prior to the surgery? Because this makes it sound like pelvic floor surgery is leading to cognitive decline.
I wrote a response to that, but I'll talk about it. So thank you for that question. No, I could talk about this for hours, you all, and I'm happy to get my contact out and talk more. But notably for this study, these were older women, so women 60 years and older that were what we call, and I'm using air quotes, cognitively intact, meaning that they had no diagnosis of dementia or mild cognitive impairment, and their baseline testing, there was nothing that was consistent with a mild cognitive impairment or dementia diagnosis. So this is somebody coming in doing well. And it's not the pelvic surgery causing it. I want to be very, very clear. Pelvic surgery for pelvic floor disorders is life-changing. I see it being life-changing for women. But what's happening is, think about this, right? Think about a surgery that you get prepared for, where we're doing EKGs to see what the function is of the heart. We're getting blood work to see how your kidneys are working. We don't do anything for the brain, really. We really don't, but we should. We should be doing something before the surgery to get a better understanding of what each person brings to the baseline as it relates to their brain, and then using that to inform what decisions we're making about the surgery and recovery in itself.
That's a really great point. I never thought about that. Why focus on only urogynecology post-op versus all post-op?
All of it's important. All of it's relevant. I specifically choose to do this because I'm trying to move the needle, specifically for women. And I do think that there is a role as it relates to estrogen receptors in the brain, thinking about pelvic floor issues, the amount of inflammation that already exists or does not exist because of these pelvic floor issues. And so when you put all of the surgeries together, right, heart surgery and brain surgery and spine surgery and gyn surgery, it just all gets too muddy. And I want to understand why. And so by making it really narrow like this, we're getting closer to the why. And once we figure out the why, then we can figure out well, what do we do to prevent it, or what do we do to treat it?
Yeah. Also, we are urogynecologists, so that's the patient population we have access to. But I put in the chat also that this is the #1 surgery that older women in the United States will get in their lifetime. So I think probably Dr. Agnebaum know this, followed closely probably by some orthopedic surgery, probably knee or hip or something. But prolapse and incontinence surgery are so common in this patient population of women specifically that it deserves, I think, its own research focus.
Fully agreed.
Is the post-surgical cognitive decline permanent, or do people tend to regain some or all of it as they recover?
A large majority of people recover. So a lot of, especially, so as there's been a panel of experts that have come together in recent years, and what they have all sort of come together in making these terms or this nomenclature is that if there's any cognitive decline beyond 1 year, it's no longer a perioperative neurocognitive disorder. At that point, we're talking about a cognitive disorder, something that is persistent. We need to be thinking about what else is going on, but it could be the springboard for something that's catastrophic where people don't recover from that. And so while that's rare, it can happen. And so you want to be thinking about, am I, or is my mother, or is this loved one at risk? And if they are at risk, are they in the bucket where they're more likely to not recover? I can share, most of my work has been on cognitively intact patients, but work that's been done on people who have existing cognitive impairment, those are the people who are more likely to not recover.
Another attendee asked, other than eating well, exercising, and drinking a lot of water, is there anything else you'd recommend for overall urinary health over the course of our lives?
Yes, vaginal estrogen cream. It's my #1 recommendation.
Jocelyn, you have like a reel out there on TikTok, right, about this?
I'm sure I have several. And Dr. Ackenbaum does too. She was in the video that we recently made, which is so adorable, but also so informative. We gave it 1,000,000 out of 10 in terms of things you could do for your urinary health in menopause. So that's my #1 answer. There's a lot of them, but that's my #1 answer.
That is a great one, and I would put that at the very tippity top of the list. I also think, we're all living our lives, and, just the bladder is very resilient, but be kind to your bladder. Like, a lot of us get going and we don't empty our bladders 8-10 hours during the day, and the bladder, you're like training your bladder to be this big vessel. Just be kind to your bladder. Try to empty, every 3 to 4 hours if you can, knowing you all are busy and incredibly productive people. But, the beauty of that is you can always retrain it. So
you can.
What age do you typically recommend starting that vaginal estrogen cream?
I mean, there aren't set guidelines for this, but if you come to my office and you're over the age of 40, I'm going to be screening you for any symptoms of genitourinary syndrome of menopause. And if you want estrogen, I'm going to give it to you. So there isn't a guideline for when to start, but if I was prescribing it to myself, I'd say like in your 40s, I'd be like, I don't know, maybe it's time. I also prescribe it to a lot of premenopausal women. I mean, it really depends. But I mean, there was research that came out recently that we could decrease women dying of sepsis related to UTIs. I can't remember the exact number. I think it was at least 50% decrease in mortality related to sepsis from UTIs if women were simply on vaginal estrogen. So the healthcare cost that's been associated is in like the millions, if not like billions of dollars. I mean, it's a lot of money just for like a little tube of cream.
Is that something that you can only get from your gynecologist?
You do need a prescription in the United States. In Europe, you do not, but you do need one here.
Doesn't necessarily have to be a urogynecologist, though. It just depends on if there's a prescribing clinician who is open to and feels comfortable with prescribing it.
Are there any risks to using the vaginal estrogen cream, or can it be used preventatively or only to treat?
It can definitely be used preventatively. And there honestly are very, very minimal risks. People are always asking like, oh, I had breast cancer and my worried about breast cancer, a family history of breast cancer, can I use it? Yes, you can. There is a lot of excellent research now that actually shows that women with a history of breast cancer, for the reasons I kind of just alluded to, actually have improved survival if they're on vaginal estrogen, because what's most likely to be dangerous to you as you age is recurrent UTIs. So yes, you absolutely can. It does not cause breast cancer or blood clots. There is a great advocacy group now within the urogynecology and urology communities trying to get the FDA to update the packaging insert to vaginal estrogen, which it still has like a black box warning on it, which is left over from systemic estrogen from studies from the early 2000s. So it's very outdated and does not like accurately represent the risks. So there really is no patient that I feel as though I cannot put on vaginal estrogen. You'd have to have an actual allergy to the cream itself for me to not prescribe it to you or recommend it.
Great questions. We're going to shift gears a little bit and kind of take things a little bit from the policy route. Given the anti-DEI attitude of the administration, is there a better way to frame getting equal pay for urogynecological procedures than equity?
That's a great question. Liz has been helping us with that quite a bit. There's a few different strategies that we're looking to employ, but in some ways we're looking to actually use that logic to help our cause, in that a lot of people are saying like, oh, we should just get rid of gender altogether. Like men and women are equal. Okay, if they're equal, then let's make them equal then. If there's no differences, if we're not gendering things anymore, then let's not gender urinary procedures. They should all be reimbursed the same way. So yeah, it's a little bit of semantics, but whatever, we can get, we will take. I don't know if Liz wants to add anything, but we have been very thoughtful about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that we have found that there's, for example, with the CMS reimbursement issue, if there's certain codes where we can just say it doesn't matter,
Yeah.
right? Male or female, it should be the same code, same reimbursement amount. I think that works really well with this current Congress and the current administration. And the other thing that I found works well is when we point out sex differences. So, for example, in talking with some key leaders of the Committee of Jurisdiction for Health, they didn't even know that two-thirds of Alzheimer's patients are women, or that women are twice as likely to die after an ER admission related to a heart condition. So we just need to explain sex differences, that it goes down to the cellular level. And as a result, we have to have better science, more accuracy, and therefore we need to account for sex-based data. So if you explain it like that, I feel like that's how we can win and break through and get people on board. In this environment right now, talking about equity, inclusion, much as we care about that, those are not words that will work with this current environment. So we're trying to just adjust to be effective.
Yeah, being mindful of the audience, but still having goals, right? All right, just kind of paging through the questions again. And while I'm looking through the questions, I know there have been some questions around signing up for local events. So that same link, womenshealthadvocates.org, that's where you can sign up to get, you'll get them straight in your emails. You can also follow the Women's Health Advocates LinkedIn page. There is a Women's Health Advocates Instagram account. And then, of course, all of us on LinkedIn are eating, breathing, sleeping, all of these women's health related events, topics, research papers, articles, everything. Always constantly sharing that. All right, just kind of getting back through some of the questions. Why is it not standard to do hormone measurements before having, forgive my pronunciation if this is incorrect, oophorectomy?
Yes, this is very interesting that this has become like a bit of a medical Q&A, but happy to answer that. We know that hormone levels are such an enormous range and they fluctuate day to day. So any like time point that you pull out of a trend is not helpful. So I can't give like specific advice to that, but I will say like related to oophorectomy, there's a lot of emerging research being much more critical of opportunistic oophorectomy, which means like removing ovaries at a young age. And I think a lot of equity around that with male procedures is like, if, I think it's like 12 to 15% of women have their ovaries removed by age 50. Like if we were castrating that number of men before the age 50, like there would be an uprising. So we need to be like really thoughtful about whose ovaries we're removing, what risks we're addressing, what risks are unknown, and then even after menopause, like what are the indications for oophorectomy? That's definitely something that I've seen a lot of advocacy around on social media, and just, I mean, I feel strongly about that too, as I think does Dr. Ackenbaum. I think we've talked about this before.
Bringing in some of the other speakers, this is a question for Maura. You have lived through your experience firsthand. If you could speak directly to decision makers, and I know you have, or funders, what is one thing that you would ask them to prioritize when it comes to women's health research?
Wow, there's so many things. And I wouldn't just say breast cancer because I had it, but I think that what I think the main point, and what I said also when I'm speaking, that they need to understand how much work is required to get that, take it from basic research and to collect data, to even bring new innovative tools into the clinic, so that in new treatments, diagnostics, treatments, all of that takes a massive amount of work and data and patience to get that done. And that's something that can only be pushed, I think, with government funding. It's not enough to raise equity funding or donations. So that would be my, everyone has the soft spot, and whatever it takes to get the message across to them because their mother had this or their sister had that, then play on those strings and get them to do it.
That's a great point. Melinda, you have built a movement that blends music advocacy and women's health research. Why does community driven support for research matter?
Well, it really makes all the difference when, we have a concert and we have 2,000 people in a room, or we're doing a global campaign with a major brand, and we have this collective unity, right? And when Women Who Rock does our campaigns, a lot of that is through social. So again, it opens up that conversation. And I think just going back to the community engagement, one of the reasons that music has been such a unique driving factor in this is because I think it's really helped to take some of the fear out of asking questions and learning more about research. Yes, anytime that we can have collective voices versus one, it's just more amplification.
Literally and figuratively. And we are just about at time, so let's round it out with one more question. Liz, I'm going to just kind of bring it full circle. You have been at the forefront for pushing for policy change and to close gaps in women's health research and care. What gives you hope right now? And where can everyday people plug in to help?
What a great question to finish with. Thank you so much. So I'm very hopeful because of all of you. For us to get such a huge response shows that there's a tremendous interest, passion, brilliance, expertise out there across the country. So no matter where you are not alone. There are people like you who want to make a difference, who care deeply about women's health. So I just hope that we all will hold on to that. I know it's frustrating with what's happening on the national level, but there are still things that we can do. And I am so hopeful when I see all of you come out for our Capitol Hill days, when you send those letters in, when you dial in for our monthly calls every first Wednesday of the month at noon. And then when I talk to members of Congress and their staff, and they're interested and they want to learn more and they want to see how could we do an amendment? What letter could we write? How could we help? So please hold on to that hope. Hold on to the anger too. I think that can be pretty motivating, but hold on to that hope because I really do see that we are connecting and making a difference. So thank you.
Thank you, Liz. Sign up for the events, sign up for all of the information. Information is power. And we look forward to continuing the conversation. Thank you, everyone, for joining, and we'll talk to you soon.